All right, guys, let's get this thing kicked off here. Welcome to DevOps for Defense. We have got some really incredible guests in here tonight, helping us celebrate. We'll have Robert come up and talk from GitHub, and Lucas came down. These guys flew down from DC to speak to our community. I can't thank them enough for doing that. And then after that, we'll have a special guest. John Willis is coming over. He's coming over from, I presume, Atlanta to meet with us and talk with us, which I got to say is really amazing. I'm kind of geeking out a little bit. This makes two authors of the DevOps Handbook that we have had in this facility working through things. I think I have a new bucket list item. We'll finish out the list. We'll see how that goes. Please keep eyes on what we're doing by checking out our blog online there at DevOpsForDefense.org. I'm almost anti-social media, but we try to put out the tweets and the posts and the events so you can track us there. As always, let's start with our code of conduct. If you haven't noticed, this is an unclassified space, so we're gonna not use any dirty words. Please treat each other with respect. Please don't talk about your secret sauce, your private proprietary stuff, but please do talk about your experiences, what you need, what others might be able to help you improve, and where others need your help, please share with them to do that. Learn from others. And as always, the guys at Rocket let us use their space for free. They set everything up for us. They're incredible hosts. So on your way out, please be sure to help them out as well. So a few of us got to go out to DevOpsDays Chattanooga last month. We had a good time. A little bit of a surprise. I actually got asked to do a lightning talk while we were there. Doing a lightning talk without practice and with about an hour and a half notice is very nerve-wracking, if you were wondering. But went pretty well, and you can check out the video there. Thanks to everyone who joined us in Chattanooga. It was really a great day. Let me just say, all the videos are up on YouTube. Look for DevOps Days Chattanooga on YouTube. In particular, the last talk of the day was about systems thinking, the first way, and it was outstanding. I would recommend it to everyone here. Speaking of YouTube, DevOps for Defense is now officially on YouTube. We started last month. We recorded the talk by Red Hat. We're doing it again right now. So it's nothing fancy. It's just my screen and the audio coming through this system. But if you want to keep tabs of what we're doing, or that you saw something that you want to go back and review as we go through this, that is now available. You can search for DevOps for Defense on YouTube and see what we're doing every month. One thing I learned about in October when we went out to Vegas for the DevOps Enterprise Summit was something called Girls Who Code. It's the first time I had heard of it, and as soon as I got home, I Googled it. It turns out there's local chapters here in town working to break down barriers for young women getting into technology. So I'm actually really excited. Miss Marshall has come to be with us tonight, and I want to give a challenge. Look for an opportunity to donate a day, just 1 day a month, not even a full day, a few hours with these young ladies as they work through their projects and their clubs. Get with Miss Marshall. Her information is here. You can check her out on the website. And I know that she was just talking about some projects that the young ladies are working on. You've got about 30 involved right now in your program alone, and they're getting started with some really interesting ideas. They need a little bit of help taking it forward. The people in this community, I know, are incredibly generous. Please get out there and look for those opportunities to work with these young ladies and really break down those barriers to entry into our industry. This is our 2-year anniversary, so thank you for coming out and helping us celebrate. We started in December 2017 with 8 people sitting around that TV over there. That was it. How many of the 8 are here tonight? Just out of curiosity. I see 1, 2. Where's Justin? I know he was here. 3. Yeah. We're doing pretty good. We've had a couple of really neat events along the way. Our 1-year anniversary was our real first huge event. We had about 70 people show up, and we had Stack Overflow come out. Lou came over and talked to us, and I would just like to give a shout out to Lou. Where are you, Lou? Thanks for coming out and hanging out with us for our 2nd-year anniversary. Stop by, say hi to Lou, and he has stickers, which you forgot last year, Lou. September, we had Atlassian come out. In November, we had Red Hat come out. We've actually been on a really great roll, and I really hope to keep it going. After my idea after the last year's DevOps Enterprise Summit was really to double down and try to bring the best possible information to this community as we evolve, and really embrace DevOps and DevSecOps. So please stick with me for this ride. If there's anything that I can bring, anything that you need, I'm here to help you. Let me try to bring anything I can out to this community. So we mentioned Girls Who Code. We also have the Green Pea Press in. If you haven't noticed, right around the corner, we are printing custom T-shirts. 2 designs I did. Lauren, one of our co-organizers, did 2 of the designs. Please go out there and grab a shirt. They're $25, and we're giving every bit of the proceeds to Miss Marshall to help her students advance their projects and grow. And this is one where I hope my wife's not listening. Sorry, honey. I did just start GitHub Sponsors. It's a new capability on GitHub where we post everything that we do here open source. If you like what we're doing and you want to help out, it's available. It's obviously optional. I spent about $1,000 getting all of this set up for everybody. It's a little pricey sometimes. That's not normal, obviously, but it is a little pricey. And if you want to help out and keep this thing rolling and growing, please feel free to get onto GitHub Sponsors and support what we do. Coming up in January, right after the new year, I know a lot of people are going to be out, but we are going to do a back to basics session. A request from members of the community. Let's take a step back. Let's look at the 3 ways. Let's look at the 4 types of work. Let's look at the 5 ideals, and really make sure that we have a solid foundation to build on. In February, I got to say, I was so excited yesterday when I got an email from the CEO of Gradle. They are coming to town. We're going to talk about build automation. We're going to talk about instrumenting our builds. We're going to talk about getting real intelligence out of that and root cause immediately. They have got some incredible tech that they've come out with. We're going to see what they can bring and how we can get that insight into our processes and really streamline our capability delivery. In March, GitLab's coming out, kind of along the lines of what GitHub does. I don't really know all the details and differences, but we're going to learn about that. And then some things that we're looking at beyond that first quarter. I'm almost convinced I need to get Nicholas Shalon out to talk to this community about what we're doing, to get out on base and talk to our customer space about what's going on all the way up at the highest levels of the DoD. The transformations that he's doing as the Air Force Chief Software Officer is really pretty incredible. So I've got his contact info now. I'm going to be reaching out and try to organize that. Dr. Mick Kirsten, he's the CEO of TaskTop and the author of Project to Product, which is a phenomenal book. If you haven't read it, highly, highly recommend that. He showed interest in coming out and speaking to us, so we might try to do that a little bit later in the spring. And then I've been talking with Dr. Pearson at Alabama A&M. He's a professor of computer science and cybersecurity. He has shown some interest in helping us organize a hackathon, try to see how we put these principles that we talk about here into practice. We'll be reaching out and maybe talking about how we could do something a little more concrete than talking and eating all the time. More to come on that as Dr. Pearson and I try to put an idea together. If there's anything that you think would be cool to do in that vein, please let me know. We'll work together and make it happen. So with that, I hope we got to see our flyers around offices all around town. hopefully still up around universities around town. We are so happy to bring GitHub to speak to this community. We've got the lead engineers for the Department of Defense and Intelligence community here to talk to us about what's going on with GitHub, how they've been evolving recently, and what capability they've got to bring. So with that, I would like to welcome Robert up to the stage to give us the rundown on GitHub.
Thanks, John. Man, it's a good turnout. I want to reiterate. I'm going to stand away from the projector, so I'm not standing in my own slides. A couple things, real quick. Girls Code. I've spoken at a bunch of their events. They're awesome. I have 4 kids, 3 which are daughters. As much as you can do to support them, it's a great cause. If you look around the room, you'll understand why there's a need for Girls to Code. So it's a pretty important event. Also, GitHub sponsors is something that GitHub went live with about 3 months ago, and it's a way for the community to support all of the open source initiatives, all the folks that are contributing to this space, because really there hasn't been a way to do that in the past. And I forgot the top dollar line, but there is one. But the donations are matched by GitHub. By GitHub, I mean the very deep pockets of Microsoft. So I'm going to talk a lot about GitHub kind of later in the talk. First thing I'm going to do is talk a lot about kind of the world we live in. It should be the world you guys are very exposed to on a daily basis. Again, that's my name, Robert Freeman. This is Luke. If you need to buy something, he's got Square. If you want to buy some GitHub, he'll be more than willing to sell it to you. Also, if you've been, this is my 3rd time giving this talk today. If you went to one of the earlier ones, don't answer the questions. All right. The prizes are just gratitude, by the way. So I got a couple of pictures up there. I'm going to start with a thing that's not pictured there. Saturn V. I drove by it a few minutes ago. Anyone want to guess number of lines of code in a Saturn V rocket? I heard 2 million, 15,000. I heard 0. It's run by hamsters. That might be true. 100,000 lines. Now, mind you, is 100,000 lines of code probably put on cards shoved into a machine. So it's probably a lot of work. The next picture, F-22 and an F-35. F-22 first flight, 1996. All right. How many lines of code on its first flight? 10 million. Anyone else want to take a guess? You're going 0 again? Also, hamsters. All right. 2 million lines of code. All right. It's a lot. Seems like a lot. But nowadays, not that much. F-35, 10 years later, 2006, first flight. 8 million. So we've quadrupled the amount of code, according to this guy. Anyone else want to take a guess? 500,000 lines of code. We've actually gone down in code because we've gotten more efficient. Might be true. 15 million lines. On first flight, it's about 24 million-ish now, is what I've heard. Now, 2020 Ford F-150 hybrid. Just came out. There's a hybrid because there's more code in a hybrid. Obviously, they got to do like charge controllers. There's a lot of extra machinery there. It's got XM. They got the thing that cheats the U.S. Emissions things. That's got to be built in. That's a lot of code in that. You can ask VW. So, how many lines of code in a Ford F-150? 10 lines. 10 lines. All in BASIC. That is true. All right, any guess? 35 million? You want to go higher? 40 million? All right. 150 million lines of code in a Ford F-150. Source is Ford. So, what? Yeah, it's 2020. It's brand new. Everything's, there's microcontrollers in the windshield wipers. So a lot of this code isn't built by Ford. A lot of this code is built by their suppliers. It's built by contractors. But, and I'll probably hit this slide in a few minutes, there's 150 million lines of code. My guess is less than 15 million lines of that code is original to Ford. And even that isn't necessarily original to that F-150. It was probably in the Ford Escort that I drove to high school when I was in high school. It was silver, got good gas mileage, it's a very practical car. Nearly 50% of the S&P 500 will be placed by 2026. That's a guess. But I will tell you, half of the S&P 500 that's here right now is different than what it was in 2000. All right? There is constant innovation happening, and it's driven by software. You guys probably know a lot of these logos. Who here has used Uber? A couple people. All right. Who here has used a taxi in the last month? Couple. Who here has used an Uber in the last month? Okay. So that's the world we live in. I mean, there's obviously that one, Tesla, Netflix. I do not pay for cable. All right. Some people do. I do pay for Netflix, though. And I also pay for Netflix for my parents and my in-laws. So I should probably just cancel all that and pay for my own cable. But this is the world we're moving in. Companies are now moving to become software companies. My previous employer is actually the same as John Willis's. I used to work at Docker. We had a customer. They're not traditionally known as a software company, but they claimed that was their main focus. They were a software company. They're very popular in urban America. Their colors are green and yellow. Anyone want to take a guess of the name of this massive software company? John Deere and the Green Bay Packers. They're probably also a software company. Yeah, John Deere is a software company. They make tractors, sure. But I guarantee you, there's a lot of companies that can make okay tractors. But what they can't do is what John Deere is doing with software. They can't build autonomous tractors. They can't build smart sensors, SaaS platforms that send that data from that sensor to dictate when to plant your fields, when to water your fields, when to harvest your fields. That is the investments that John Deere is making. And honestly, that's where all their revenue, their significant revenue, and specifically their profit will come in the future years. That's what keeps them in the S&P 500. That's what makes them relevant. And what's relevant about software is developers. And GitHub is the home of all developers. I probably should just end my talk there and just say, congratulations, thank you, GitHub. But software developers are key to this discussion about innovation. But as this is called DevOps for Defense, and may at some point change to DevSecOps for Defense, which John David would then have to print out new koozies and make a new cake because of the new logo, but that's the direction they're going. It's not just developers that are playing in this field. It is security folks that are making sure this code is safe to run. It's the ops folks that are allowing platforms and building platforms for this code to run on. And beyond even that, it's the folks that are defining those requirements, that are testing those applications. They'll all come into this software development lifecycle. And if you're not including all of those when you build software, then all you're doing is extending the length of time it takes to do this correctly. Sure, you can build software really fast with just developers, but it isn't necessarily going to be what the end users want. It's not necessarily going to be what's safe or run efficiently. There's 40 million developers on GitHub. How many developers are there in the world? What do you think, John? 80? 80 million? 1.2 million? They all have 4 accounts. Well, actually, that's bad math. 37 accounts. I do have 2 accounts, so you can mark that down to 39,909,999. 26 billion is what the estimate is. So there's 14 extra million people. Well, 13,999,999 because, again, I have 2 accounts. Who are they? They are security engineers. They are ops folks. And they're also requirements drivers. There's folks creating issues that developers are then building against. And that's what's key, is a real collaboration platform, a place where you're really storing code and interacting. It has to be driven by more than just coders. That idea that coders are locked in a room and they have their like pizza and their Jolt Cola and they're spitting out code is not the reality of the world. coders are interacting with other coders. They're interacting with ops folks, with other engineers. Maybe they're interacting with hardware engineers. If you aren't collaborating across, then all you're doing is slowing the pace of innovation. It looks like some animations here. There we are. There we are. GitHub is the home for the world's code. That's true. Thousands of open source projects live on GitHub. Most recently, about 6-7 months ago, Apache announced they're moving all of their open source programs into GitHub. They're kind of the last holdout. I mean, most, if not all, of the open source programs you're familiar with are run and operate and store their code in GitHub. With that, what is it, Spider-Man? Spider-Man says, like, or maybe his uncle who died said, with great power comes great responsibility. All right, we got a lot of code in GitHub, and it's the code that really runs the world. That's a lot of weight sitting on the GitHub shoulders or the Octocat's shoulders. And that's something we take really seriously, because as much as I'm going to encourage you to use open source, I'm also going to say, hey, be careful if you use open source. Because there's a slide here somewhere that's going to talk about the number of contributions we had last year. We had 1 billion contributions to code last year. How many of those, percentage-wise, came from the United States? You want to take a guess? 33%. Just under a third. We only got that extra 0.3. Just 0.0333 below a third. No, 20%. 1/5 of the code contributions on GitHub came from the U.S. So, I mean, if you're like a lot of the folks we work with, you're in San Francisco and you're living the dream out there. You just bought a condo for like $19 million and have 400 square feet. That's awesome. It's love to be inclusionary. However, if you work for the DoD, that's who you support, that's your main client set, like it has been for mine for the last 15, 20 years, that's a little scary. Because I'm not saying that if the code is contributed from, name your foreign nation, that's a bad thing. It's just something that you need to pay attention to. And as the keepers of the world's code, there's a lot of things that GitHub is doing to try to make that more secure. And I'm going to talk about a couple of those things. There it is. 1.1 billion contributions per year, 120 million private repositories. All right, a lot of big numbers. Very cool. Good job, GitHub. All right, 3 powerful trends. These are what we're seeing that are dictating modern software. 1, developers drive innovation. And the reason that's important is there's not enough developers. Right now, there's expected to be 1 million developers shortfall. Not next year or the year after or the year after that. 1 million right now that we're short. That means next year, it's going to be above that and above that. John David told me that they were expecting to be short 23,000 engineers in Huntsville by 2026. That's just here, 23,000. I don't even know what the population of Huntsville is. That seems like a lot of new people that you guys need to bring in or train. You got a lot of people to teach the code. So that's an issue. So you got to do a couple things. 1, you got to train some more engineers, right? Also, you got to make those engineers you have work better, more efficiently. And the key to that is code reuse and collaborating. And so that's what GitHub is all about. That's what the open source community is all about. And what I'm going to kind of drive to is that's what inner source is all about. All right? I think back when I was in high school, the government used to talk about inner sourcing. It was like we can't outsource things, so they'd inner source things, and it just meant like producing stuff in like Arkansas. That's where I went to school, in Arkansas, and there was a lot of like random factories because that was not as expensive as New York, but much cheaper but more expensive than Bangladesh. But when I'm talking about inner source, I'm talking about all the code that's developed within your project, within your program, within your agency, within your command, within your branch of the service, and exposing that to as wide an audience as you can from a security perspective. So if I'm the F-35 program, I can't expose everything, all of my code to America or to the world, but maybe I can expose some of it to the Air Force. And maybe there's a little more than I can expose to the DoD. And there's a lot more I can expose within the F-35 program, because there's a lot of moving parts in that program, and there's a lot of silos in that program. And that gets multiplied across all the programs that we all interact with. So that's a key component of this. Second thing, open source is your software supply chain. All right. 98% of all new software has open source in it. And of that software, 80 to 90% of that software, that code base itself, is open source. So if I'm Uber or I'm Ford or I'm the Air Force and I build software, well, only really 10% of that is my secret sauce. That's what I developed. That's unique to me. That's what I stack on top of Hadoop, or I stack on top of Docker, or I stack on top of Python or Rust or Go, or all these programming languages which are open source. So thus, if you're writing in them, you're using open source, by the way. And of that 10%, well, ideally, I'm not writing all 10% of that. If I got a million lines of code to write or 5 million lines of code to write, I don't want to write 500,000 of the 5 million. Ideally, I'm going to reuse 400,000 lines of that code from inner source, from other things that have built within my agency, within my company, within my command, that maybe do a similar thing. Maybe I'm building a RESTful API for my HR system, and down the road for some weapon system aboard ship, someone else is building a RESTful API as well. Well, they accomplish different things, but a lot of the technology is reusable. So why can't I reuse that code? And that's where you get to that. That's how I write 150 million lines of code. Because and I'll tell you, Ford did not write 150 million lines of code, or anywhere near that. And then finally, cloud enables faster cycles. And by cloud, I'm not just talking about putting it in AWS or putting it in Azure. I have to mention Azure because I officially work for Microsoft. I'm talking about VMware. I'm talking about your private clouds that are sitting in there. I'm talking about your OpenStack deployments. It's really any any non-centralized compute resource. Because we're talking about DevOps. DevOps deployed all the time. That doesn't mean it's better or it's good. It's done wrong a lot. So this is where GitHub is critical. One, collaboration. That is where we're special. Okay. There's a lot of source control systems. I told someone earlier today that ClearCase wasn't that bad. Take that back. I apologize for that. But in the grand scheme of things, code storage, in the simplest vein, is code storage. Subversion, Team Foundation Services, ClearCase, name your poison. If all you're doing is saving code, assuming it doesn't crash on you, it's fine. What makes GitHub different is the ability to interact, to collaborate, to expose your code, not just so people can reuse it, but also so you can get interaction on its review. They can participate in the code writing process. And that's what really makes GitHub a different thing, and a thing that developers love. And what we are missing, and what we haven't really done until very recently, thanks to those billions of dollars that Microsoft gave us, is focused on building that capability out. We don't really want to deploy a function unless it's best of breed. We are the best of breed when it comes from SCM, when it comes from code management, configuration management. We are the best. The market has determined that based on market share. But we're not best of breed in CI/CD, in monitoring, in infrastructure service, because we aren't an infrastructure service company. Nor are we planning to start an infrastructure as a service company, because it doesn't make sense. If we cannot be the best at it, we'd rather build integrations to let you use the best tools. So a lot of our focus is on enabling integration with other DevOps tools, which there's a lot of DevOps tools, and there's a lot to choose from. And we in no way want to determine that our solution is the best for you, as opposed to building a solution that can act as kind of the central hub for you to integrate the tools you're using. And maybe that's not because the tool you're choosing, maybe you're going to use Jenkins, which I like Jenkins fine. So don't take this as a drawback comment, but maybe you have Jenkins and you've already spent a bunch of money with CloudBees and you've already built a lot of jobs. Well, maybe for the first year, as you start to deploy out, that is the right solution for you. And we want to make sure that we integrate with all those tools, and we've partnered with literally thousands of companies to build that capability around there. Second, security. GitHub is the only end-to-end security for your software supply chain. We start at the point of code all the way through deployment with our CI and CD capabilities. I'll talk about actions in a few minutes. I'll talk about package repository in a few minutes and really what those are. And then I'll talk a little bit about static code scanning and what GitHub's doing on the static code scanning space. And the really cool part about some of this what we're doing is it loops back to the idea that as the stewards to the world's code, we do feel a lot of responsibility to make it safer to use all these open source projects. And finally, DevOps. I'm not going to hit on that too much because I'm hoping most of you guys know DevOps pretty well, being the place where we're at. So collaboration. 89%, so I already talked about this. Here's the slides. New code, it's very small. Inner source a little more. Tons of open source. That's how you're efficient, is reuse the kind of world think around code and capability. If you decide that it makes the most sense to build your database from scratch, you're going to spend a lot of time. There's a lot of really good databases built for a lot of different purposes, and a lot of them are open source. Use those. Dependency Insights. One of the really cool things that GitHub has done to help secure the world's code is built more in the way of dependency insights. And by dependencies, I'm talking about those dependencies to your code. So those pieces that you build into your project. So if you're using Python, you're putting import that extra package, that would be one of your dependencies. You know, those other components that fall down the chain. And what a lot of people don't realize is those are very much hierarchical. So I might pull in one package that pulls in two more, that pulls in five more, and all of a sudden I get this spider web below me of 30, 40 packages that are supported by tens of thousands of users. Cool thing about that is I basically took my team of one and made me a team of thousands. Scary part about that is I've basically given commit control to thousands of people on my code, right? That's scary. So one of the things we do is we look at all your dependencies and we build a dependency tree and show you what they are. So even though you can't readily see what dependencies those other dependencies have, we'll show you what they are. We'll graph them out, and we'll show you where there's vulnerabilities in them. And not only will we show you, we will notify you when new vulnerabilities come. We'll say, hey, by the way, there's a vulnerability here. And we did that about a year ago. And we sent out tens and tens of millions of notifications. And guess what? Most of them were ignored, and people left the vulnerabilities in their code. And then there was a bunch of hacks all over the place. And people still ignore them. So we bought a company called Dependabot. And we announced this about 4 months ago-ish. And what Dependabot does is we went and we said, hey, if you're not going to do anything about it, we'll do something about it. We will put a pull request in for you. And we'll give you the update. And we'll test the merge. We'll kind of make you ready for the final review. And we did that. And guess what? Still, people ignore those pull requests, but more have done the updates. And those are a couple of things that we're trying to drive to make code more secure. All right. On the bottom piece, continue to make good decisions about open source. We'll also tell you what the licenses are. If any of you understand all of the various types of open source licenses, congratulations. If you could pull me aside afterwards and explain them to me, please do. But it's a big concern. Only use things you should use. So what makes open source community healthy? And this really, when I talk about this, I'm really more concerned about what makes an inner source community healthy. So as you build this inner source community within your organization, these are the type of things you need to do. You need to have active maintainers and contributors. So what is a maintainer? A maintainer is the gatekeeper of that code. You know, they know all of it. They're making sure that the contributions are sound. And why that becomes important is that, well, I'll tell you a story. So, and in fact, I don't know if I have a slide for this or not, but a couple years ago, there was an NPM library, and it was maintained by an engineer who, GitHub sponsors didn't exist, so he thus gets paid $0. And, wasn't feeling a lot of love, had done the program for years, has 2 million pulls a week. So this is a major program, major open source program. Another maintainer or potential maintainer, another contributor came and said, hey, I'll help out. Let me do a little something. I love what you've done. That contributor came in. The other guy was like, fine, I'm not getting a lot of love anyways, and I need to like raise money for my family. You're the new maintainer. He promotes that guy. That guy becomes the new maintainer. That maintainer is a Ukrainian national, which there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of Ukrainians making great code. However, if you are a DoD resource, this should raise a red flag to you. At least maybe I should look into this. Well, this changed. About a month later, some new code was committed, as it is every month. Difference is this code had a worm. Literally a worm. It's like every cliche hacker movie you've ever seen. It was a worm that took like a couple cents out of every transaction in a Bitcoin vault. Because all hacking involves Bitcoin. Everyone knows that. Standard engineering practices, security best practices, that's important. And then healthy two-way communications. You need to be talking in your inner source community. The maintainers need to be talking to their contributors. Folks using the project need to be talking to the folks that are building those projects. And one of the things we've done at GitHub is we've built a reverse dependency tree. So if I open source something, you can now go and see who's using it. Where is it being used in which projects, which is great for your ego potentially, or crushing for your ego if no one's using it. It's definitely possible. That'd be everything I produce. But it allows you to see who's using it, who's contributing back you to, and it's really gone a long way to also drive the GitHub sponsors piece I mentioned before. Inner sourcing company. These are companies that have done inner sourcing to great success. One thing that's not mentioned there, a big inner source agency, I guess would be the term, is the VA. They've been a real big success story for us. Started with about 20 users about 2 years ago. Now they have 20,000 seats of GitHub. Then those are not 20,000 developers. VA does not have 20,000 developers yet. Hope they'll get there. Those are ops engineers, those security engineers, those are the requirements definers. That's across the board. Some organizations have even taken it all the way to where GitHub has taken it, where instead of using the SharePoints of the world, the content management systems of the world, we do all of our documentation on GitHub. So if you see documentation coming out of GitHub, that's for GitHub, that's been created in GitHub. That's the collaboration tool our technical writers have used. Security and compliance. This is the main focus. I've talked a lot about security and compliance. I'm going to keep talking about security and compliance. And I'm going to mix in a couple things. I don't remember how many slides I have. Obviously too many. I'm going to talk until John David or John yank me off the mic. Top, NPM Lib, Blunder Bitcoin wallet. I mentioned that. So that's the challenge, right? You want to use open source, but you don't want to use open source. So how do you make it safe enough that you can actually access it? And a couple of things we're doing. I mentioned Dependabot. That's important. You got to know when you have vulnerabilities. Ideally, we automate the pull request for you. Another thing we're doing, which I'll probably, here we go, here we are, dependencies. There's the scary one. Very few programs, especially big ones, is the tree look this simple. Okay? Does anyone remember the picture of the black hole? It was cool, right? Black hole was cool. So black hole, there was 200 scientists that were involved in it. And keep in mind, the black hole was a bunch of pictures that were collected from telescopes, but it was really a software project. It was taking all these pictures, combining them all together with specific algorithms, and creating this image. Literally a gajillion pictures, I believe was the technical number. Cool part about that was there was 200 engineers. There's no way those 200 engineers could do it. They used a ton of open source projects. And the contributors to open source projects represented about 30,000 engineers. So the actual team, none of these guys got the awards that the 200 folks did, but the actual team was about 30,200 engineers that made it possible to take that picture. And the 30,000 engineers that contributed, they got paid zero. So keep that in mind. Now you, if you want, you can figure out which ones are. I'll give you a list. You can contribute to GitHub sponsors if you'd like. This is the direction we have to go, right? We have to move security to the left. We have to move from where we get to the breach, post-deployment, which is what a lot of security is around. It's around reaction. We do like does anyone use Nessus? Nessus, a couple of Nessus users, right? Nessus is great. It tells you all the vulnerabilities you have in your system that someone's already found, which is important. Keep using that. However, you're missing all the ones that no one's discovered yet. And those need to be caught back in development, or as many as you can. You're not going to catch everything. That's just nature. It's unfortunate. If I have a bug in my code and I catch it as the developer, it costs, I don't know about $80, but it's going to cost not much for me to spend a couple hours recoding that. All right? If I get to build and it gets kicked back, it's a little more. I get to test and Q&A is a little more. Then when I get to deployment, I'm not even going to bother too much with the breach piece, because the breach piece is absurdly high, right? This is the average. The 3.8 million is the average. I think JD told me the Equifax number was actually 700 million. So that was the actual cost. And when I first used to give this talk, I talk about how that was like the extreme case, the outlier case. That happens every day. The other day, I was on a news site. It mentioned a text and voicemail breach on Verizon. I saw it 10 years ago. I've been like, what the heck? I would have clicked on that link, read it. I saw the link. I just went on with my day. And I was like, oh, that's too bad. It happens all the time. So this, yes, they stole the next Frozen 3. It's been leaked. That's true. That's worth billions there. That would be a big, yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's who got text messages. I don't know. So, yeah, it happens all the time. It's a constant problem. I'm only going to focus on the deployment piece. If you miss a deployment, at least the world that I lived in the DoD, if I had to go back in my 6-month, 1-year release cycle, it was a lot more than $7,600. All the contractors like me that were getting overpaid to redevelop these things, all the testing, all the retraining, all of that would go in, it was a lot more than $7,600. So even if you assume that you didn't happen to the breach, it's super costly to catch this on the right. On the right. Security has to move to the left. You have to use tools like GitHub Advanced Security, which looks at the code itself. And GitHub Advanced Security was something we announced about a month ago. And what that is that is a static analysis tool that takes your code, looks at it through its execution path, compiles it, and puts it in a relational database that can be queried. And then we have about 2,000 queries that we run against that to find all the errors that we'd expect. And by that, I'm not talking about the things that have been identified in CVEs already. I'm talking about the things that match patterns to other errors we've seen, other security vulnerabilities we've seen, known issues with bad code. And it might be that you had this code, and then you made one small change, and 16 steps down the execution path, it then creates the issue, and all of a sudden that comes up, and you got to fix lines that worked perfectly fine a year ago when you deployed. That's the type of thing that GitHub Advanced Security is built to catch. And it's built to catch it in the review cycle. So at the pull request time, when that pull request comes through, we will automatically scan that code, identify the lines that need to be addressed, the type of issue it resides, and allow the reviewers to look at that and say, okay, we can't proceed. This is too big of a danger. Or that's something that we're going to remediate another way. We're going to use a physical control or something else to it. So we're okay with it moving on, whatever it might be. It gives you that power to address those very early on that side. Again, moving security to the left. Because this little draw here, right, professional developers, 40 million, which again is 26 million. That's wrong. That's the number of estimated security researchers. How many security researchers are there here? Not security officers, security researchers. They're all sick, so they couldn't come tonight. Yeah, there's not very many. So 570 developers for every security researcher. We need to empower all of us developers with tools that allow us to supplement the security researcher's job. And tools like static code analysis, those are the type of things. And you can't just have them. They need to be built into your process. They need to be built in the software development lifecycle, and they need to be shoved in front of the reviewers so they're seeing the errors and they're not getting bypassed. So these are the people that are important. Security researchers, maintainers, developers, security teams. They all need to be involved to build a secure, compliant environment. So, yeah, GitHub's great. Tap myself on the back. So securing open source. If you're going to use it, it needs to be secure. proactive code scanning, we talked about that. Dependency Insights, talked about that. Automated security fixes, automated pulls, talked about that. The last kind of things that I want to talk about are a couple of the things that GitHub is doing. I don't think I have slides. I'm going to skip that. There's DevOps. You're going to talk a lot about that. These are a lot of tools for DevOps. A lot of decisions made. John will tell you the right ones to use. Hopefully GitHub. And moral of the story, DevOps, super good, way efficient, use it. All right, so GitHub, cool things that we announced 2 weeks ago. One, GitHub Actions went GA. That is a full CI/CD tool that works with everything you do in GitHub. It allows you to do everything from automatically put on a thumbs up emoji on a comment if it has the word good on it, which seems silly. Two, I want to automatically deploy a pull request. I want to cross-compile it across Linux, Windows, Mac. Also, on the Linux side, make sure you do it on AMD 64 as well as ARM7 and blah, 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 blah. And I want to deploy it to Kate's cluster in EKS or in OpenShift or whatever it might be. Also, I want to throw in some testing jobs with the testing tools like the Seleniums that I built in and tied back into my GitHub instance. Gives you full automation. Lets you take the world of GitHub and instead of having to build in connections to a Travis, a Circle, a Jenkins, and instead have a native CI/CD tool that's built out of the box. Same time, if you want to use Jenkins, Circle, Travis, there's a bunch of others, Bamboo, you're more than welcome to do it. We work close to those partners, and we love to integrate with them. Second cool thing, package repository. Or package registry. You've always been able to store code in GitHub. And that's great. But what you couldn't do is once you had that code and you compile it and you had completed binaries, you then had to, use Nexus or Artifactory, or you'd have to go specific technology, being Docker Hub or NPM, and that's where you stored them. And you got that. You basically created a break in the kind of code ownership certification path. Now with GitHub Package Registry, you can store your completed binaries within GitHub in GitHub Package Registry. That went live 2 weeks ago. It's available on cloud. It's free for open source projects, for personal development. Feel free to use it at will. If you want it on server, it's going to be a couple months, but it'll be there as well. Another cool thing, you guys heard of a seed vault? You guys heard of this seed vault? Big program. They took all these seeds of all the trees and all the plants and stuff that we've killed over time and the ones we haven't killed yet but will kill, and they buried them underground in, Norway, I think. Right? Norway? That's where you bury stuff. Never knows that. Norway. So all Norway, and if everyone dies, all the trees will be there, or everyone but one person because someone's got to plant them. Then come out, then grab all the seeds and put them in. It's awesome. But all software is lost. Until now. GitHub has taken the entire GitHub repository, put it on, I'm assuming, giant external hard drives, buried it in Norway. This is a true story. So everything that you've committed by, I think, January 1 will go into the, I don't know what it's called, the seed vault, the software vault, in the GitHub software vault, and then at some interval, we'll provide updates. So like every 6 months, all the software will go back in there. The moral of this story is comment your code very well. All right? A guy 10,000 years from now is like, I don't know what to do with these things. John, Dave, any other new developments that I mentioned earlier in the day that I forgot to mention that you want me to hit on? Hey, thanks for having us out. It's been great. We appreciate everything John David does. We'll send a bunch of stickers, so those will be here next month.